Alright everyone, some people want a full-on debate about this. I don't know, because, it's just as easy to do this. He's made his point clear and I'm making mine clear. Now, first and foremost, I like Nick Fuentes. I am a subscriber and I follow him on Twitter. I don't have a problem with him personally, and I've debated him before on religious issues. But I figured I would call him out on one thing here, which is, and I'm going to read through his tweets so that you know what he's saying here. Link in the description if you want to read it for yourself. Make sure I'm not lying about what the content is or something. But here's his set of tweets about libertarianism and my rebuttal to what he's saying. Libertarians talk about freedom as if they aren't just pleasure-seeking wages who live to consume. Most people's lives since the Industrial Revolution resemble that of livestock. You're not Thomas Paine, you're a pasty low-T schlub that couldn't survive 24 hours without the state. You exercise your sacred liberty by doing highly specialized menial tasks 40 hours a week for 50 years so that you can purchase upgraded consumer products every few years. I imagine an unremarkable, overweight man with bad facial hair walking out of Best Buy with a big new TV, feeling like a real king. Some academic told you that this is economic freedom, and economic freedom is freedom. Feel the freedom as you enjoy network shows in 4K. Wow. Now, some of it is a fairly obvious stereotyping. Now, I'm going to make one quick assumption, given the benefit of the doubt on this. I have a feeling that he understands that this is hyperbolic, and that this is partially like shitposting in a political sense. And by the way, I'm not even, and I'm not throwing shade here, I honestly don't know. I don't know whether Nick considers himself at this point more of a tradcon / civic nationalist or more of an ethno-nationalist, because I see him saying things that sort of coincide with both, and maybe he is sort of both. It doesn't really matter, but I mean, obviously I disagree with his post here, so let me go through and pick through this a little bit. First and foremost, if you're claiming that most libertarians are just, wage slaves, I guess they flip burgers or something, this almost shows contempt for people who live that sort of lifestyle. And I don't think that that's the point, but it looks a little bit contemptuous of people who have these lower level jobs. Not everyone can be Nick Fuentes and wear a suit, and work on their own schedule, dude. I have to keep that in mind too, even though obviously I don't dress for success. I don't believe in that ethos. I'm more like dress comfortably, because I like to be comfy when I'm making videos or gardening. By the way, I go out to get the mail like this, and I'm like fully barefoot walking through the snow and shit because I'm from Vermont, so I don't give a fuck. As for people's lives resembling that of livestock, it goes back before the Industrial Revolution. Most people lived like that anyway before, and in any urbanized situation, people were like street urchins. I mean, look at London at the time. It was before the Industrial Revolution, people had a more difficult life. Industrialism is not a bad thing within its proper constraints. Of course, there are certain things that need to be done. With regards to that, industrialism today leading to certain censorship by corporations, environmental degradation that affects people violating the NAP and so forth. That's why I do, as an aside, believe monarchism can coincide with certain elements of environmentalism. I would say this. The stereotypes here are perfectly wrong. For instance, I'm taking myself as an example here. I don't believe in the abolition of the state. You appear to be casting libertarianism off as a homogenized total that is 100% anarcho-capitalist, like post-Stéphane Malnoux. I'm not an anarcho-capitalist, for various reasons, the most important being I see anarcho-capitalism as nothing more than the displacement of the current power structure of the state with privatized groups that basically are going to end up doing the same thing for pragmatic organizational purposes, only they won't be constrained by any sort of legal framework. I believe in using different power sources against one another and opposing them in order for them to constrain one another as tightly as possible. The private market, the individuals, private organizations, state and federal governments, localities, things like that, different forms of, the legislature versus, the Supreme Court or some other judiciary system, the executive power, however it may exist. These groups should primarily they shouldn't work together too much. They should be looking for one another's potential abuse and attempting to block it however they can, circumvent it however they can in order to maximize liberty and reduce as much as possible the impact on the day-to-day lives of people of the state or any other entity. Anarcho-capitalism would basically be saying, hey, McDonald's can tell you how to live because you live in McDonald's town or something. I don't actually believe in that. Monarchism has, by the way, already worked. It was already in full flux. The early United States, from the early founding up until, again, not just the Industrial Revolution, but thereafter. By the way, the Civil War, not what killed it off. It was the Gilded Age. For the first, we're talking 80, 90 years of its existence, was essentially a monarchist society. And if you look back, I mean, if you're like just a routine paleocon, you're like, well, I want to constrain government just a bit more than now. I think it's gone a little too far. Okay, so you're talking about the kind of governance we had in, what, the 50s or 60s or something. Fewer bureaus, fewer taxes on more people, less interventionism, hopefully, and things. I would like to go back to the pre-FDR era and the pre-military industrial society era, in which at least some proportion of society was deregulated far further. That's monarchism. Limited government, more constitutional constraint. Yes, I agree that certain private institutions have garnered so much power they must be subjugated to the Constitution in part or in whole. I believe in that. But the idea that even the average libertarian, self-proclaimed as an anarcho-capitalist, is wrong. The average libertarian self-proclaimed as a monarchist, or more appropriately, a paleo-conservative. There are people now that say they're libertarians and they're technically on the left in some essences. I mean, it's not necessarily the proper use of the original term, but it's been appropriated by other groups simply because, I mean, they might be more skeptical of government going to war. They might be more skeptical of censorship or something. Okay, granted. That's a libertarian-style issue. You're taking up a libertarian ethos on it. It doesn't make them a full-on libertarian. They're not like a member of the party. They're not necessarily fully a member of that ideology. I am more or less, and again, there are some things on which I would disagree with some libertarians on. It's not a homogenized total is what I'm getting at. Number two, the idea of people being like pasty and low T and stuff, that they can't survive 24 hours without a state. What about those of us who can grow our own food? We know how to fire a weapon. We have land proper to, do what we need to do. I think you're thinking of a certain subset of nouveau libertarians, a new wave of libertarians that were kind of cringy at a while. That's not the main line of the party. The idea that the average libertarian is like fedora tip, hey, here's my katana, and stuff like that. No, that's again, just a stereotype. People throw that at atheists, too. They try to take, and this happens, like, people throw it at you, too. Say, oh, well, these people on the far right, or tradcons, or identitarians, or whatever, are X, Y, and Z, and they'll find an example of someone that conforms to that negative stereotype, and then they'll plaster it on everyone else. They try to do that, I mean, it's just routine propaganda. That happens among all groups. I like to stereotype authoritarians, while understanding that it can be hyperbolic. The idea that everyone who's a libertarian does menial tasks and wants upgraded consumer products and stuff. Again, you're conflating consumerism with libertarianism. Libertarianism as, on the economic side, appreciation for the free market. Hey, I think there should be less constraint on the free market. I don't know what you're talking about. That consumerism pervades all. You've got people who proclaim themselves communists and they're buying shirts. Che shirt made in China, bought from Walmart. $5 Starbucks Crappuccino. Their $2,000 iCrap product. Okay, well, this person's obviously not a libertarian. They're sitting there hailing Marx and crazy shit like that. They're still part of that consumerist culture. It's called being part of the West. We have a great deal of excess, but that excess, in the sense of cheap consumer products or worthless crap that people don't really need, that marketing and branding happens within a corporate structure that's more monopolistic, regulated, and left-wing than it is capitalistic and libertarian. Yeah, and you can argue that, well, that's fine because look at the availability of certain products. Okay, yes, it's also a very high-tax, high-spending society that only thrives because the U.S. is willing to bomb anyone who exempts themselves from it. It's not libertarianism. That's something totally different and arguably far left in some ways. It also approaches, in some essences, corporate fascism. There's a worrying fusion of that with leftism lately. It's quite worrying, especially in the sense of Silicon Valley. And the part about like the unremarkable overweight due to bad facial hair, it's just like, okay, well, again, so it's just hyperbolic. Some academic, find me a libertarian academic, dude. No, most of these people are self-proclaimed progressive, which means nothing. Liberal, which means nothing in the case of academics usually. Some of them are outright communists. They believe in an all-powerful state. They're the opposite of libertarians. An academic told you that this is economic freedom, and economic freedom is freedom. It's part of it. Yes, the ability to work and to derive income from that work and then to be able to consume things, yes, that's wonderful. By the way, I totally agree with that. It's more than just that, though. It's also social freedom. The idea that people should be largely left alone by all power structures if they are not directly victimizing others, that would be a libertarian line to take up. And I don't think that Nick Fuentes agrees with that. I think he's more moralistic in some respects, has a more religious approach to life, and that's fine. Like the difference being, you might say that it's acceptable to censor, like I don't know, some leftist group or something. I would never consider it acceptable to censor you, no matter what you are saying, unless you are credibly threatening someone, defaming somebody, inciting violence against them, or unless you like hire a bot army to spam someone malevolently. If you're not doing any of those things, I don't really give a fuck. You can say what you want to say. I don't think it even matters if it is directly hateful towards groups. I don't even think we should temper that kind of language. I think that that's a worrying first step in corporate tyranny. We've already taken that step. We're taking several more steps now. And you've got the entire so-called progressive left pushing for more corporate censorship. The idea, though, that libertarianism, people will also say libertarianism's never been tried. Yes, it has. Monarchist libertarianism has existed before. Yes, in the classically liberal period, it proliferated everywhere. It set the stage for the expansion of Western civilization into the Americas. It set the stage for basically the dawning of modern man in the truly modern sense. Classical liberalism / monarchism is great. It's the most successful thing that ever hit this world. But you wouldn't know that to talk to someone who conflates it with anarcho-capitalism and speculates that all libertarianism is anarcho-capitalism. I understand that libertarianism is a more new term, but it loosely applies to that classical liberalism. It's basically the same ideology. Monarchism just goes a little bit further than even the classical liberals did, but even some of them, not necessarily. You could also simply say classical liberalism when you're talking about the more tempered versions of monarchism, like I believe in. No, I want considerably less censorship. I want considerably fewer taxes. I want people to be left alone. Yes, I do think it'd be wonderful if people were self-sufficient, could garden and grow food and go hunting, and guns are great, I think. So, yeah, there's libertarianism. Not exactly, hey, I just want my new 4K TV. Dude, I don't even watch TV. I create content. I create content that's more entertaining and more popular than a lot of cable shows are. I'm not exactly absorbing the corporate swill, if you know what I'm talking about. That's about all. Peace out.